Unfortunately, it feels like Groundhog Day, rocket for rocket, civilians, children caught up in the middle of it. Is there anything Australia can do other than the usual lines we hear?
I genuinely worry whether or not we'll actually have any desire or will to use our voice to encourage calm on this in a long-term, meaningful way. By that I mean, we talk about supporting a two-state solution, but we don't see any evidence of progression on this. No firm advocacy or no firm pathway to get countries of a like mind to make this a reality. You see some of these images that you just saw on the TV now that you'd shown to your viewers. I don't think anyone wants to see rockets from one side harming Israeli families, and you certainly don't want to see a disproportionate response from the Israelis affecting Palestinian families. And an average Australian who hears that Palestinian families are basically bringing themselves together to sleep in one spot because they're worried they're all going to die together as a result of what's going on there. If you've got a heart, you can't be affected by that. And we've got to be able to find a way through. What should the Australian government be doing specifically differently to what it is? I think it's taken a while, but the US has finally urged a ceasefire, one. I think we should be saying a ceasefire is really important on this. And we have to have a pathway to seeing a two-state solution occur. And what we saw that provoked all this, you've got to look back and think what provoked all this in the first place. And we saw settlement activists trying to force out families from their homes in that part of the world.
Also the response to Hamas rockets.
Totally. As I said before, it's unacceptable. Like we want Israeli families to live in peace and Palestinians to live in peace. I think it's important that countries who believe in this step forward, like Australia, working with like-minded nations to say we've got to get away, got to move forward on this.
You're here to watch your colleague, I assume, Jim Chalmers, speech at the Press Club. He'll talk about states' income tax cuts and take aim at them. The benefit begins at $45,000 for these, so low-income earners. At what point does Labor think they become unfair?
Jim today will focus in particular on the $100 billion in new spending that we saw last week and ask the question, what are we getting out of it, particularly if people can't see any movement in their wages. In fact, there's a prediction of a cut in real wages and there's no tangible benefit for all that spend longer term and racking up $1 trillion in debt. And on top of that, then arguing, as the government wants to, that it might spend, up to $130 billion for high-end tax cuts without really justifying how that should go. And I think we should ask the question how that will all be financed. When you see the Treasury Secretary today, it's clear now what we're going to see. The Treasury Secretary, Stephen Kennedy, saying there's a $40 billion difference between tax receipts and what we spend on disability, aged care and welfare support. Right. I read that as saying that that's the likely target for cuts into the future while we're borrowing $130 billion for high-end tax cuts. Well, the Treasury Secretary doesn't decide that. But the interesting warning on Stephen Kennedy on, you can't splurge forever. Do you think Labor can run again on we'll have a better budget bottom line in the coalition? So your question, underneath that question is the coalition's have its cake and eat it too. So they spend all this money now, they've pumped out $100 billion extra in top of the budget, taken us to $1 trillion in debt, and down the track say, okay, now, how's Labor going to pay for all what it wants to do? While it hasn't justified as a Liberal Party or National Party how it's managed to spend $100 billion. And so what it wants to do is have the constraint on Labor and what it wants to do down the track while it's gotten away with this massive expansion in finance.
But I'm asking if Labor will try again what it has previously, and that's to say we're better economic managers, will pay off more of the debt.
Well, the coalition painted themselves as better economic managers and said they'd reach a budget surplus when they were elected in 2013. So much for that. And on top of that, the Treasury Secretary, the Treasury Secretary has a degree of influence in the shaping of budgets. And what I saw today reported by The Australian is the Treasury Secretary saying there's a $40 billion gap between what we get in tax and what we expend.
You think
hang on, let me maybe expend on disability, aged care and welfare.
But you're saying what that says he's advocating to cut that spending.
What that says to me is those are the targets of future cuts, instead of the rorts and the mismanagement of expenditure by the coalition. I don't think that the people on disability services, aged care support, or in terms of our broader social security system should pay the price for mismanagement by the coalition.
Got to leave it there. I'll see you at the lunch.
Thank you.